I mean, how evil can a country really be if their number one priority is furthering their civilization?
Welcome, everybody, to this new episode of InFocus. My name is Stephen Cox, and I'm joined yet again by Gen Z influencer Wade Searle. Hope you had a great Halloween, and everybody who's watching, hope you had a great Halloween, and we look forward to getting into today's topics. First and foremost is the fact that President Trump has designated Nigeria a country of concern, given the continued slaughtering of Christians in that country, and he's even threatened to go in, quote, guns a-blazing, to, quote, wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities against Christians in this country. Now, Wade, before throwing it over to you, I want to just give our viewers a rundown as to what's actually been going on in Nigeria, which most people probably don't know, is a country of 220 million individuals, split mostly between Christians and Muslims. Now, persecution of Christians in Nigeria began to spike mostly after the year 1999, when 12 northern states adopted Sharia law. Boko Haram in 2009, notably, which is an Islamic terror group, escalated this conflict and started to attack Christians in the decades that followed. In the 2010s and even in the 2020s, there's been numerous instances of seminarians as well as Christian lay people, as well as Catholic priests even, being abducted and even killed. So, Wade, we see this dramatic escalation happening. We even have reports confirming the situation there. In fact, a 2025 Global Christian Relief Red List report said Nigeria is one of the most dangerous places in the world for Christians to live. And this even caught the attention of Bill Maher, the atheist liberal commentator on his HBO program, who said the fact that they're getting away with this, quote, is pretty amazing. He drew attention, of course, to the fact that over 100,000 Christians in Nigeria have been slaughtered since 2009. Wade, what is the significance of Trump's actions here, and do you think ever that he will send in American troops to end the slaughtering?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a good move by the Trump administration, and I think rhetorically this makes a big shift. The liberal media seems to be hyper-focused, and of course they want to be hyper-focused on how immigrants in our country are being persecuted in America. Minority groups are being persecuted by the Trump administration. And the point here is that they're trying to make it seem as though people coming into our country illegally that are being caught by ICE, caught by the Trump administration, being sent back to where they came from. The liberal media is trying to make out this atrocity propaganda narrative of like, look at the crying children, so now we have to burn the Constitution. And I think what the Trump administration is doing with this is sort of diverting focus and changing the conversation and saying, no, look, this is real persecution in Nigeria. These people are actually being killed for their beliefs, for their religious beliefs. And so I think it's good for the Trump administration to change the conversation like this. Now, it's interesting because, of course, what is going unsaid is that Christians are being killed all over the world, but particularly in Gaza as well. There are many Palestinian Christians who are being persecuted as well. And the Trump administration seems a little more hesitant to talk about that, which is, of course, because Trump is very pro-Israel. It's an inconsistent narrative, to say the least. So I think it's a good move by the Trump administration, and of course we want the Christian persecution in Nigeria to stop. But it would be an even better move if Trump were to go one step further and push to end this worldwide. And I think there are some moves being made on this. We see Trump pushing for peace in the Middle East. That's like his number one priority right now. And so I think good moves are being made all across the board here by Trump.
There's an counter-argument to be made that, well, okay, he's been looking the other way essentially on that situation for the last 2 years or last year since he's been in office. And we need to have more action. And there has been, I think, movement on that front. He did tell Netanyahu, he said that he's not going to allow Israel to annex the West Bank. That got Netanyahu quite upset. And you can imagine there's going to be more conflict on that issue. In response to the larger dynamic at the situation in Nigeria, it is worth pointing out, though, that in 2025, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom did say that the U.S. government should designate Nigeria a country of particular concern. So that was, I think, a good thing that they finally recognized this. And what's curious to me, though, is how the Vatican has responded to this issue. And what I'm seeing is that it's kind of failed in its duty to call this out. So just recently, the Aid to the Church in Need group published its own report on religious persecution across the world. And it noted that in Nigeria, organized crime as well as state-backed actors are the ones carrying this out. And they noted specifically that over January 2023 till December of 2024, religious freedom in Nigeria has escalated quite significantly. Now, why is any of this important? How does it relate to what Trump has been saying? Well, because the current Secretary of the Vatican, Cardinal Parolin, who was rumored to be a potential papabile at the conclave earlier this year, diminished the role of the attacks being carried out by groups like Boko Haram. He said, quote, "The violence is not a religious conflict, but rather more a social one. Disputes," he said, for example, between herders and farmers. We should also recognize that many Muslims in Nigeria are themselves victims of the same intolerance. So this actually, Wade, got a lot of attention across the world. Many people, many Catholics especially, called for Cardinal Parolin to resign. Archbishop Vigano came out exceedingly strong, blasting what Cardinal Parolin had said here. How do you take those remarks? I mean, is this just a social conflict, not really a religious one? It seems to me the Cardinal is vastly underestimating, and perhaps even purposefully, the situation here.
Well, it's a very strange move to seemingly diminish what's happening in Nigeria. And, it's interesting because, of course, this is not like a social conflict. What a coincidence that all of these farmers being killed happen to be Christian by a Muslim country. And, of course, the people doing the killing are radical Islamists. So it's a very strange move, and I'll say this. Of course, it should be the church's primary focus to stop Christian believers from being killed mercilessly in their homes, torn from their families. Unspeakable things are done to their women. This is happening in Africa. It's happening in Nigeria. It's happening in Gaza as well. And if this isn't the church's number one priority, then what are we really doing here? Like, this is the body of Christ. These people are true Christian believers. Maybe some of them aren't Catholic, but I'm sure a lot of them are Catholic. And so if this isn't the fight, then I don't know what is.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, moving to the U.S. We just saw a recent poll from The Economist/YouGov. They did a poll asking a wide range of questions, and it found that, including same-sex so-called marriage, it found that respondents said that 54% of them believe that it should be legal. 33% said homosexual so-called marriage should be illegal, and 13% are unsure. Now, this is a pretty significant shift, Wade. We've seen in past decades that this number was actually quite higher, if the poll is to be believed. This suggests that the American population has something of a potential LGBT fatigue. Do you kind of see the results of this poll that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this trend is particularly being led among Gen Z men. What we have seen with Gen Z men is, of course, they're becoming very conservative, much more conservative than their parents. And a recent LifeSite News report has revealed that they're actually more likely to go to church than their parents. So church attendance among Gen Z males is skyrocketing. And they're coming back to Christ, and they're coming back to conservative values. Gen Z men are more conservative than many generations before them. They're more conservative than millennials, Gen X, or boomers. So they're really returning to tradition there. In a huge way. And a huge part of this is rejecting transsexuality, homosexuality, all of this strange sexual deviancy that was pushed in the last 20, 30 years. Gen Z males are rejecting that in a huge way, and that's sort of driving this shift. So the interesting sort of potential development with this is the GOP going to follow their base? Because, of course, boomers are a little more liberal on this issue. Boomers are much more accepting of homosexual marriage, but the boomers are on their way out, and maybe that sounds insensitive, but the future of the Republican Party are these ultra-conservative Gen Z men. And so the question is the GOP prepared institutionally to follow their base where they're headed, which is to an extremely conservative, godly worldview? And if they're not, are Gen Z males prepared to sort of hold the GOP hostage and say, we're not going to vote for your candidates anymore unless you meet us where we are on this issue, because we don't want this filth in our nation anymore. We do want our country back. We're tired of this constant pushing of this transsexuality, this homosexuality. That's where the base is at right now. And these people are the future of the party. And so is the party going to accommodate these people into the big tent? into their supposed big tent movement, or are they going to continue basically being pushed around by homosexuals like Dave Rubin or Jim Hoft with the Gateway Pundit? The question is, like, which direction really is the GOP institutionally going to go? Because, of course, they're the ones running the candidates. They're the ones that are in the House and the Senate and putting up candidates for national office. So I think that's the angle here is, of course, Gen Z men are rejecting this, but where institutionally is the GOP going to go?
Yeah, and you saw that in the Republican run-up to the 2024 election. The Republican Party changed its official platform to be more open to so-called LGBT conservatives. Donald Trump himself, as well as his wife especially, courted LGBT Republicans, log cabin Republicans specifically, over that campaign. And but I must say, he has governed in a way that obviously is very much more pro-life than I think anybody understood him to be. Again, his wife was out there saying, I'm very much in favor of pro-choice. And as a president, though, Trump has taken a number of steps to attempt to curtail abortion in some ways. Obviously, he's had issues. Now he wants to fight for IVF. But it seems on this issue particularly, though, yeah, you're right, that hit the base of the Republican Party moving forward, especially young men under 35. They do want that trad wife experience. They do want the more conservative traditional gender roles, which is, obviously what the Bible calls for. Now, I think what's interesting here going forward is that the Supreme Court, actually coming up this Friday, November 7th, is set to hear a hearing in regards to Kim Davis. Now, Kim Davis, for those who remember, she was a marriage clerk in the state of Kentucky who refused to sign a marriage certificate for a homosexual couple. And this set off a firestorm of controversy back then. And when I remember hearing that, it was obviously the lie that so-called same-sex marriage was not going to affect anybody, right? What we do in our bedroom is not going to affect you. And we've seen that lie manifest itself over the last 10 years to now demand that we bake you a cake, bigot, right? This is where we're at in this whole thing. Now, the case is significant because Davis's appeal might actually entice the court, or might result in the court having to revisit the Obergefell ruling, which allowed for so-called same-sex marriage in the first place. Now, Wade, if that happens, that could be a monumental situation, just as was the situation where Roe v. Wade was overturned. Do you have any insights or predictions on that? It's hard to always predict these things at the court level, obviously, because there's internal dynamics, and it seems to me that Justice Roberts, the chief court head of the court at the moment, he's always sort of playing both sides. It does seem the conservatives do have a majority, especially with Amy Coney Barrett, but I'm not super optimistic the court will rule in Davis's favor and eventually take on the case. But it does seem that Justice Thomas, as well as Justice Alito in recent years, have signaled their willingness to revisit that case.
Well, with a couple of judges on the court, we have some good Catholics on there, we have some good conservatives on there. But with Roberts and Barrett, they are just kind of unreliable, to say the least, on these sort of controversial issues. And so we'll have to see how the case goes. I couldn't make a prediction either way. I'm not really too sure which way the wind is going to blow on that. But, with the original case, when homosexual marriage was first legalized in this country, we, of course, heard the argument from conservative Christians saying that this is a slippery slope. We're going to see more sexual deviancy, more degeneracy being normalized in our country. And those people were told, that's ridiculous. This is only about what two consenting adults are doing in the privacy of their own bedroom. It's really none of your business. Why should the government be involved in marriage at all anyway? And so they were basically told, shut up, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about. And what happens in just 20 years? We see these pride parades everywhere. And they're starting to decline, of course, because it's losing popularity. But in every city, we see just like the most disgusting pride parades where gay people are parading around. The movement has gone much further than homosexuality in recent years. We were starting to see transsexuals, and that was extremely strange in the 2010s, but then very quickly it started to become normalized, and the Democrat Party was pushing this hard. Of course, that's completely lost popularity now. You don't really see Democrat candidates advocating for this anymore. But, if conservatives didn't start to push back when men were entering women's sports and when men were entering women's bathrooms, I mean, how far do you think that movement would have gone? Like, clearly this was not the end goal. The end goal was not homosexuality 20 years ago, and the end goal was not transsexuality 5 years ago. Clearly this was going to go further, and when they start to put, like, porn in the curriculum for children to read, when they start to put strange sexual things in education for children, and they're starting to normalize, kids can be gay too, kids can be trans too, what they are, of course, going towards is the normalization of pedophilia. That was, of course, the next step. Everyone knew that. And obviously that was going to be the biggest hurdle for them, but they were pushing towards that. And so, of course, the conservative Christians that had the original opposition to gay marriage, they were right the whole time. It was a slippery slope. This did not end with, like the ideal that liberals were trying to sell us was that two guys who were normal in every other respect, and you wouldn't know they were gay unless they told you, they're just going to be married and live privately by themselves in their home, and this will never disturb anyone, and you'll never hear anything about it again. And then the second it was legalized, they start, like, parading themselves around the whole country naked, and it's like, okay, well, what did we tell you? So I hope this is overturned, and I think a lot of Gen Z men will agree with me. This needs to be overturned. Our society just needs to return to normal. And we don't mean the normal of 5 years ago. We don't mean, well, we're conservative now, so we're going to push the timeline all the way back to, like, 2015 when it was weird for men to enter women's sports. We're actually conservative, which means we don't want to go back to just 2015. We want to go all the way back to when society was normal, when society actually honored the Christian worldview. And it doesn't do that now. It didn't do that in 2015. It didn't do that in the 2000s, and it didn't do that in the 90s. We have to go back further.
The most repeated phrase in Scripture is "do not be afraid." We are called to speak the truth, to proclaim the gospel, and to live our lives without fear. For the past 3 years, we've brought this mission to the very heart of the church. At the Rome Life Forum, you won't just hear truth proclaimed, you'll have the chance to ask your questions directly to the speakers. This is your opportunity to engage, to challenge, and to go deeper into the battles we face today. Fear not. Her immaculate heart will triumph.
Another area that seems to me to have been used as a sort of Trojan horse, if you will, is the area of climate change on the political left. And a significant moment in that movement just occurred this past week with Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft and well-known climate alarmist, switched his stance, basically, and said that climate change won't bring about, quote, humanity's demise. In a recent blog post, the billionaire said, quote, although climate change will have serious consequences, it will not lead to humanity's demise. People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. He also criticized, quote, the doomsday view of climate change, which focuses too much on near-term emissions. First, Wade, what's your initial response to that? We've been bombarded with propaganda about how ice caps are melting and how we have to act fast. I mean, it was Al Gore in the 2000s after losing the presidential race in the year 2000, who started his campaign, really a crusade for green ideology, if you will, to warn the planet that the world was going to end not long after if we didn't take immediate action. And in fact, in his film, Inconvenient Truth, which was, I think, in the early 2000s, he said, quote, within a decade, there will be no more snows of Mount Kilimanjaro. Well, the snows are still there, and Mr. Gore is still living in his plush palaces. The Obamas are living off the Massachusetts Bay out there, apparently not fearful of the seas rising, as potentially the former president once was. What's your initial reaction to this? It seems like a big moment that is underappreciated.
Unfortunately, Florida and California are completely underwater, so it seems like the climate change alarmists are right. And Michigan's next. I'm up to my eyes in water right now. The studio is underwater. I'm drowning. I don't know how to swim. It's over. We're all going to drown. The ice cap's melted and America's underwater.
I mean, it is remarkable that we hear these claims, and yet, the billionaires really don't take much action themselves. I mean, we just had a climate event at the Vatican where Leo blessed a glacier. Arnold Schwarzenegger was there, obviously, spewing tons of carbon emissions for having these sorts of events. The glacier, I believe, was flown in again from Iceland. That had to be preserved somehow in a cooling chamber, I'm sure. But to the larger point here, Wade, the World Economic Forum, the globalist class, Davos has been pushing this idea that we need 15-minute cities, that we need to track our emissions as well as cow farts, because that's going to endanger the planet as well. And so for Gates to sit here and say, well, it's not a doomsday situation, seems to me to undercut every argument we've ever heard over the last 20 years. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And it seems strange that the elites are sort of starting to backtrack on this issue. And I think the reason why is this, people have been making these predictions for decades. These climate change predictions that every city is going to be underwater in 60 years or whatever. And it never happens. And people are noticing that, of course, the elites are buying like beachfront properties in California. And it's like, okay, well, if California is supposed to be underwater in 20 years, then aren't you just blowing your money? And so, of course, people caught on that this is obviously not true. And this is obviously a lie sold to us for a particular reason. Now, I think it was pretty clear decades ago that the reason was to get everyone into the cities. Because if they could convince everyone that the world's on fire, then of course everyone moves into the pods in the cities because it's better for the environment. And they stop driving their big trucks, and they stop living out on ranches, and they stop eating meat. They eat bugs, and they live in pods, and they just consume whatever they're told to consume. And I think really the reason that we're starting to see that backtrack now is because the elites don't need you in the city to control you anymore. The internet is so widespread. Everyone has a black rectangle in their pocket where they can just be constantly fed a stream of propaganda. Everyone's kid has an iPad now. Everyone's on TikTok. Everyone's on Instagram. And so I think the elites sort of realized, everyone's in their own little city, basically. Everyone's connected to us directly through the internet. We don't need people to actually move into cities anymore. We don't need to convince people that the world is on fire and the only way to save the environment, to save the planet, is to live in a pod and to stop driving your car, because now those things simply don't really matter. I think what we're going to start seeing is more a push for mass surveillance through companies like Palantir, and which is a CIA cutout. And I think the real move here is to sort of surrender on these issues that are now unpopular. Like, the Democrat Party has surrendered on transgenderism. They're not pushing that as hard anymore. And now we're starting to see, Bill Gates walking back climate change in the way that he just did is a pretty significant move. What we may start to see next, Pope Leo came under a lot of fire for blessing the block of ice. And I think it will be very telling if they start to walk that back from the church too. I think it's a good development that they're not pushing it as hard as they were, but let's not be so naive. Clearly there's another plan here. There's another angle.
Yeah, it definitely does seem that the church, the Vatican, is really being used as the vehicle to promote this. If Bill Gates is backing away from it politically, maybe the left falls away, the Democrats fall away and focus on something else under Trump. You might see the church now, the Conciliar Church in the Vatican, that is, speak up more on this issue and kind of be its champion along with the United Nations. So we'll see where that goes. But last topic here, Wade, to cover with you is John Henry's recent visit to Russia, where he met with, among others, Joseph Schutzman, who used to be an American. Well, he is an American. He was born in America, but he migrated over there to Russia with his 9, now 10 children and his wife. And John Henry visited many leaders over there and spoke about politics, but also the pro-family situation there, where there is actually a tax code in certain areas to reward families with a dollar amount for each child that they have. And there's actually family-friendly areas in some of these towns that seek to promote Christian values, broadly speaking, against woke and DEI policies of the West. Now, President Putin has attacked the West in recent years in several of his speeches, especially at the Valdai speech club there. And he said it is satanic, it is from the devil. Now, obviously, there's a lot of issues between the East and the West, politically, historically, ideologically, etc. But these developments suggest to me that there is more, potentially, family-friendly laws over there in Russia than there is in many states in the United States, which are seeking to basically indoctrinate and keep children groomed into the LGBT ideology. What did you make of John Henry's visit, and do you agree with that sentiment that it seems that Russia is, in a sense, leading the way on some of these issues?
Well, I don't think a lot of Americans really expect that, because it seems like we're fed a lot of propaganda about Russia here in the West, where we're told that this is like a tyrannical state where Putin controls everything, and if you speak out, you disappear, like it's North Korea or something. And it's interesting because Tucker goes over there and he shows us what Russia's like, and it's like actually clean. Like their cities are clean and their metro stations aren't full of homeless people that are like peeing on the subway. And it actually seems like a nice place to live. And John Henry goes over there and we learn, well, they're actually more pro-family than we are. And so we're told Russia's like this dystopian, like dark country that's just like evil and the people there live in fear. And then the more we learn about Russia, the more we realize, like, wait a minute, that's us. Like, we're the dark country that's exporting liberalism and all this evil. And we're the ones telling our women, like, no, you shouldn't be a mother. You should abort all of your children, and you should have a lot of promiscuous sex, and you should use abortion as a form of birth control. And in Russia, they actually, like, celebrate childbirth. I mean, how evil can a country really be if their number one priority is furthering their civilization? They're encouraging families. They're encouraging the formation of more Christian families. Now, of course, Russia is mostly Orthodox, and it doesn't seem like that church is being persecuted over there by the Russian government. So it's very interesting to see the inversion. Americans are taught many things about Russia, and it doesn't seem like a lot of those things are true, which sort of poses the question, why are we being taught these untrue things about Russia? And what can we learn from this country, which clearly has gotten some things right that we have got wrong?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Russia obviously still allows for abortion. I believe they allow for other things that obviously we as Christians, Catholics, would not support. But broadly speaking, it does seem that they are countering the wokeness of the West with many policies that, well, among other things, I know Russia does have a ban on LGBT propaganda. They don't have pride parades, as you alluded to earlier. And there's a lot of facts that I think most Westerners are just simply not privy to. And so I think we do need to keep an open mind and to actually look at the facts on the ground and not believe the military-industrial complex lie that we are just innately at war with these people, because that only profits them and it keeps the people fighting. We have to always be aware of who's telling us who our enemies are. We often get this in the media today. We hear the terms white privilege. We want to have race wars here in the United States. We want to have old and young wars, etc. We need to look past all that and try to strike peace wherever we can. So that's the way I thought what I thought of when I was watching John Henry's speeches over there and his interviews. So kudos to John Henry for going over there, and keep up the great work, Joseph Schutzman, if you're watching. Thanks for speaking with me as well, because I interviewed Joseph several months ago. In any case, Wade, that's it for today's show. This is In Focus. My name is Stephen Cox for LifeSite News. He's Wade Searle. Until next time, take care.
Aloha everyone, this is Jason Jones for LifeSite News. We hope you enjoyed this video. For more content like this, check the link in the description. You can also connect with us on social media to stay up to date with the latest news on life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.